We begin in the United States, where an extreme heat warning remains in effect across parts of Arizona and California, with the National Weather Service in Phoenix warning of dangerously hot conditions stretching from Parker Valley and Yuma in Arizona through the Chocolala Valley, Imperial County, the Imperial Valley, the Palo Verde Valley, and the area around the Salton Sea. Afternoon temperatures in these zones are expected to reach between 107 and 112 degrees Fahrenheit, with apparent temperatures, meaning how the heat actually feels on the body, climbing as high as 110 to 120 degrees. Forecasters are calling this a major heat risk, and the warning covers the entire day through this evening. Las Vegas has already recorded a high of 115 degrees this past week, 10 degrees above what would be considered normal for this point in the summer, and El Centro, California may challenge a record high near 118 degrees in the coming days. This isn't an isolated event either. A significant heat dome has been building across the western half of the country, and according to the most recent tracking, this summer's heat has now been linked to at least 70 deaths across the United States. Elsewhere in the West, a genuinely serious wildfire situation has developed around Spokane, Washington, where fires that broke out over this past weekend have destroyed hundreds of structures and forced more than 60,000 people from their homes, roughly 10% of the city's entire population. 3 major fires in that area have burned more than 8,000 acres and remain uncontained, part of a broader outbreak of 17 active fires currently burning across Washington state alone. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, the pattern looks completely different. A cold front is draped across the north-central and northeastern United States today, and that boundary is allowing repeated rounds of showers and thunderstorms to move through, fed by a surge of moisture flowing in from both the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico across the southeast. At the same time, monsoonal moisture remains widespread across the interior northwest, the Great Basin, and the southwest, extending into the central and southern plains, the lower Mississippi Valley, and the southeast, meaning that rain and thunderstorms are likely across a huge swath of the eastern 2/3 of the country today, with the best chance for the heaviest activity arriving in the afternoon and evening hours. Slow-moving storms capable of producing repeated rounds of moderate to heavy rain remain a concern in a number of these areas, raising the risk of localized flooding wherever storms happen to stall or train over the same communities. Turning to the wider North American picture, this pattern of heat in the west and unsettled, humid conditions in the east isn't expected to resolve quickly. The most likely outlook for the rest of this month points not toward one uninterrupted heat dome, but rather a wave-like pattern, with heat building over the west, the south, and the east, punctuated by occasional cooler interruptions reaching into the north-central interior, continued monsoon moisture surging into the southwest, and wildfire smoke continuing to drift back and forth across the U.S.-Canada border as both countries manage active fire seasons simultaneously. Moving south to Mexico and Central America and further into northern South America, this stretch of the hemisphere continues to sit under one of the more complicated seasonal outlooks anywhere in the world right now, with the region caught between abnormal heat in some zones and the ongoing influence of a strengthening El Niño reshaping rainfall patterns more broadly. Abnormal heat continues to pose a real threat across parts of Central America and northern South America, according to the latest global hazards monitoring, a signal consistent with the broader warming pattern building across the tropics as this El Niño event continues to intensify. Across the equator and further south, South America itself remains firmly under the influence of this same developing El Niño, a pattern that tends to favor above-normal temperatures across much of the north and center of the continent, while creating a more divided rainfall picture between wetter conditions in some areas and drier conditions in others, depending on exact location relative to the shifting patterns of tropical convection now taking hold across the Pacific. Across the Atlantic, Europe remains at the center of what has become one of the most severe and sustained wildfire and heat crises the continent has faced in recent memory. According to the latest tracking from European fire monitoring services, the total area burned by wildfires so far this year has now reached more than 529,000 hectares, a figure that has already surpassed both the equivalent point in last year's record-breaking fire season and the 20-year long-term average by a wide margin. Fire danger remains at its most extreme level across southern Great Britain, and that extreme danger has now expanded into northwestern France, stretching through the Alps and into the Balkans, with the surrounding areas, including the wider Iberian Peninsula, central and southern France, and parts of the Western Balkans, also sitting under extreme conditions. In Serbia, firefighters have spent recent days battling multiple wildfires as temperatures continue to soar, including a blaze in a nature reserve roughly 50 kilometers east of Belgrade that has scorched at least 700 hectares of land, requiring both ground crews and helicopters to bring under control. Near the town of Kraljevo, several additional fires have forced residents of nearby villages to evacuate, with local residents describing more than 150 acres of pine forest destroyed in just a couple of days. Serbia hasn't been alone. Days of extreme heat, with temperatures reaching 40 degrees Celsius, have fueled wildfires across several Balkan countries in recent days. Beyond the fires themselves, Europe's extreme summer has taken a serious toll on the continent's major rivers as well, with parts of the Danube falling to record-low water levels this year, an unprecedented drop, even accounting for the fact that river levels normally ease somewhat during the summer months. In Budapest, the Danube has receded to never-before-seen lows, exposing sandbars and riverbed features normally not visible, and the crisis has become severe enough that both Hungary and Romania have been forced to temporarily shut down nuclear reactors that rely on the river for cooling water, since water levels have dropped too low to reliably supply the cooling systems those plants depend on. Adding further context to just how extreme this summer has been, Europe's climate monitoring service confirmed that the first 2 months of this summer were the hottest June and July on record for the Western Europe, with an average temperature running more than 2.5 degrees Celsius above the long-term average, surpassing the previous record set in 2022. July was also the hottest month ever recorded for the world's non-polar oceans, with particularly striking record highs along the Atlantic and the Western Mediterranean. According to data compiled by financial analysts tracking this summer's toll, heat has now killed more than 25,000 people across Europe so far this year. Just this past week, a devastating sequence of severe thunderstorms, torrential rain, and large hail battered southern and eastern Germany immediately on the heels of a record-breaking heat wave that pushed temperatures to 41 degrees Celsius, fracturing infrastructure and paralyzing transit hubs in the affected areas, a stark illustration of just how quickly this summer's weather has been swinging between one extreme and another. Financial and insurance analysts are increasingly describing this pattern not as a temporary shock, but rather a long-term trend, with European central bank officials now directly warning that the rising frequency of these climate-linked disasters poses a genuine and growing threat to broader financial stability across the continent. In the United Kingdom, conditions remain part of this same broader European heat and fire danger picture, with extreme fire danger conditions now extending across southern Great Britain alongside the rest of the affected zones further south and east on the continent. Moving into Asia, the Western Pacific has become the site of significant and fast-moving tropical activity over the past several days. Typhoon Dolphin has intensified and enhanced monsoon rainfall across the Philippines, where authorities say roughly 100,000 families have now been affected by the combination of the typhoon and the ongoing southwest monsoon, known locally as Habagat, with waist-deep flooding reported in a number of neighborhoods and communities across Metro Manila and the wider Luzon region. The death toll from this combined weather system, tropical cyclones Luis and Maymay, together with the southwest monsoon, has climbed to 8, with fatalities recorded across multiple provinces: 2 deaths in Rizal from a rock slide, 2 in Batangas from drowning and electrocution, 2 in Benguet from a landslide, and 2 more in La Union from a combination of landslide, electrocution, and drowning. Several additional injuries have been reported in Baguio City and surrounding areas due to landslides and a vehicle accident linked to the storms. In response, authorities suspended face-to-face classes and in-person government work across Metro Manila and 15 provinces, and numerous flights were canceled as the heavy rain and flooding continued. Typhoon Dolphin has since pushed on to strike China's eastern coast as well, where the storm has triggered a massive and fast-moving evacuation effort. More than 300,000 people were relocated ahead of the storm's arrival, and in Shanghai alone, more than 1,300 flights were canceled as the city braced for the typhoon's arrival. In Fujian province, close to 99,000 people were evacuated from high-risk areas after authorities raised the region's typhoon emergency response to its 3rd highest level, with offshore workers moved to safety, vessels ordered back to port, and inspections stepped up at reservoirs, mountain streams, landslide-prone areas, construction sites, and tourist locations.